Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for attending our January 24th Improving Talk. We are thrilled you're here spending some of your Wednesday with us. Before we start, I want to inform you about a feature in the presentation that'll make the session a bit more interactive. Please make note of the Q&A icon located at the bottom of the presentation screen. Clicking that icon will open the question and answer feature, which allows you to send the moderator questions to be delivered to our insightful presenter at the appropriate time. Speaking of insightful presenters, I am proud to welcome Chris Owens, a principal consultant at Improving, and someone I feel blessed to call my friend. Today, Christopher will be sharing a talk titled, "So You Decided You Need More Quality." The floor is all yours, Chris.
Okay, thanks, Shervin. Let me go ahead and share the presentation. And get going. So yes, my name's Chris Owens. I'm a veteran of a bunch of different tech companies in my past, including Logitech and Apple. I have some opinions about quality, and I'm going to share some of them with you today. This particular presentation, So You've Decided You Need More Quality, is targeted at founders or small company managers who are trying to figure out how to have more quality in your products. So hopefully this will be constructive for you. We're going to start talking about the foundations of quality, and two recurring themes that we're going to talk about over and over again are the practice of documentation and constructive feedback loops. I call documentation a practice because it's something that you get into the habit of doing. Anytime you have some information that you don't want to forget, that's important, that you're going to need to show somebody else, or that you don't want to accidentally change, you want it to be the same time after time, this leads to a practice of documentation. You'll find that your quality processes that you're going to be building are going to be built upon the documentation that you have and the documentation that you will be creating. Feedback loops, a lot of people are familiar with feedback. It's very popular in entrepreneur culture at the moment to talk about getting customer feedback and being open to it. But we're going to talk about how to implement that as a concrete loop so that you make the most out of your feedback and use it to improve your products as best as possible. One question that I hear fairly often is my project big enough to need quality assurance? Do I need quality? And the fact is, you are already doing quality. Even if you're just a single entrepreneur, you're doing quality. You may not realize it, but your stakeholders are giving you feedback to say, no, I'd rather you do it this way, or no, I expect this from you. And you are adapting your output to their feedback. And that is the essence of quality right there. If you feel like you need more quality, you probably want to pay attention to things like, what are the impacts of poor quality on your part to your stakeholders and to your customers? If they have given explicit expectations about product quality, then those are important to listen to. Things that may affect your need for quality assurance are if the projects you're working on are particularly complex or have a very short timeline, which are, risky things that add risk to your product. So you may want to prioritize more quality if those are part of your daily life. If your project involves a lot of collaboration and integration with other teams or other products, this can add miscommunications or delays into the system that quality assurance can help ensure go smoothly and improve over time. If you're making a product that has any kind of regulatory requirements, then you're probably going to need quality. You probably already have quality, in fact, as you look at your product before you ship it to a customer, before you release it, and say, does this meet the regulatory requirements that I have to deal with? The good news about all of these things is you can start with your current organization, even if it's just one person. If you signed up for this seminar, probably things that you're going to see yourself in this list. But it's good to remind yourself what you are looking for out of quality. You probably think you need something like you need to test for defects so that they don't reach the customer, that you need to organize and quantify customer feedback so that you can prioritize the work and understand the bug completely to fix it in a good way. You may want to do analysis on data about your defects to see how serious your customers think they are, to understand how many of them there are, and if they fall into different categories, which leads on to categorizing defects. You will want to identify root causes. We're going to talk in a little bit about the real big benefit of identifying root causes, which is if you can solve a problem and have it stay fixed, that is money in the bank. That is time that is back on your calendar that you don't have to deal with that problem in an ongoing way. And a very important way of finding that or getting to that goal is by identifying the root cause. QA is also good at developing new processes, particularly to try and address really intractable problems. Like if there's some kind of problem with your production line that happens over and over again, and it feels like you just can't make headway on it, the practice of quality is basically built around doing things like that to fix that kind of intractable issue. I mentioned earlier working with compliance and regulatory requirements. You may want to set and maintain quality standards. If you are making a product that goes out to end users, you may want to, just for the benefit of your own company, not driven by an external regulatory or not driven by customers, you may want to have your own standards that says, okay, we should never ever have a delay of more than 5 seconds after a user logs into our site before they see the first page. And you may want to have that quality standard for yourself. You can create tests for diverse classes of testers, whether it's automation manual testers or other kinds of feedback that's going to be coming to your system. You will want to look and see what kind of tests are most valuable. And this is information that you'll be gathering over time. You will definitely want to prioritize tests as well as prioritizing implementation to understand what are the really critical issues and time-sensitive issues that you're going to be dealing with. And you are going to learn to create feedback loops that will help you meet evolving requirements. Okay, I'm going to say a few words about quality leadership. And the image over on the right is a relatively famous quote, if you got as much gray hair as I do. It's from Star Wars. And C-3PO at one point informs Han Solo, "Sir, the possibility of successfully navigating an asteroid field is approximately 3,720 to 1. And most of us will know what Han Solo replies to that. And he replies something like, "Never tell me the odds." Which, you know, that builds his character as far as the audience is concerned. However, as far as the quality process, it's not great. And, you know, half joking, but half true, I propose that the correct response to that would be, thanks for bringing this to my attention. I appreciate you keeping the team's quality goals in mind. However, that would not have made for such a good movie. So talking about quality leadership, that that attitude of being grateful for feedback and treating feedback seriously is basically the core of what we're talking about when we talk about quality leadership. And things that are particularly important are don't disincentivize the messenger. If someone is bringing you bad news or news that they're not sure about, and you are impatient with them, or you heave a deep sigh, or you give them a scowl or something like that, all of these kinds of communications with them are sending a message to them that says, there are times when I don't want to hear feedback about my product. And you can live with that some. If that's part of your character, I'm sure you have other good benefits to yourself and your company that can overcome that. But if you work on being open to feedback, that is a good thing, good quality to have if you want to improve your product quality. A core goal of quality or tenet of quality is if it's not working, fix it. I have worked for very, very many companies at this point in my career where there were processes that were not working and nobody could seem to fix them. If you can manage to fix them, that is quality leadership right there. And you can help drive that through as a manager, as a founder, as an executive in your team. If you can remove roadblocks and make it so that your team can fix processes, that is a huge win for you. If you fix it so that it stays fixed, that's money in the bank. That is time back on your calendar. That is something that you don't have to worry about in the future. Very important. Tell people explicitly what you want them to do. This is something, depending on who you are and where your business is, it is very common to have very casual conversations and, sort of ironic or humorous. You may want to use a euphemism and say, oh yeah, that guy, he's a little cuckoo or something. But if what you're saying is this person isn't doing a good job, then you need to explicitly talk to them about you're not doing a good job and I need you to do a better job in this way. These kinds of euphemisms or kicking, working around the problem are things that are antithetical to quality leadership. Here's a good quote. We're going to be talking about a couple of different people in this presentation. W. Edwards Deming was during World War II, and especially after World War II, he went over to Japan to help them rebuild their industries and wrote a lot of really good material about quality. And one of the things that he encourages people to do is eliminate slogans, exhortations, and targets for the workforce that ask for zero defects and new levels of productivity. Quality can solve problems, but if you are telling your workforce, you need to do better, you need to be more productive, you need to bring in more sales, without also talking to them about the plan for doing that, then you are incentivizing them in a bad way. You're incentivizing them to use their creativity, to find a way around your current processes, to make things happen that may not be really in keeping with the overall quality of your product and the overall strategy of your company. So be explicit and mindful about the incentives that you're putting into place. You need to incentivize constructive quality in activities. And you can do this individually. You can say, if you see someone doing some kind of quality activity, if you sit down with somebody and say, let's talk about your quality goals for next quarter, and they say, hey, I have a list of things that I've been thinking about this quarter. Let's, start with my list. That is huge. That is a great quality activity that they've already undertaken, and it is worthy of, telling them that they did a great job, and even calling that out in a team meeting and say, this is a thing that this person did that is good. Cross-team people other than managers in the direct hierarchy of a company can have big impacts on the quality activities of a company or organization. And if you can get everybody in different teams to keep an eye on each other and encourage each other to undertake quality, to meet the quality goals, to keep quality goals in mind as you're going through decision-making process, this is an important part of quality leadership. And don't accidentally set up bad incentives. We talked a little bit about exhortations where you're telling employees that they need to work harder or make more profits or open new savings accounts for users without giving them a plan or a guide for how to do that. It is very easy to set up a perverse incentive for them that will backfire on you and that you will regret later. Okay, we talked a little bit about open communication. Make decisions based on evidence. If you get, someone comes to you and says, I think customers feel this way about the product. That's good. That is a piece of evidence. But if you can get data, if you can get survey results, if you can get a count from your customer service person on how many people felt that way, and especially if that's a trend line that you can see has gone up week over week or something like that, that kind of numerical quantitative evidence is really powerful. Deal with workers based on reality. When I was preparing for this presentation, I saw a cartoon that said, it had something, somebody sitting in an office, and the sign on the door said quality manager, but the signs on the wall were things like accidents happen, and like one of the signs had fallen down. And the desk was messy, and the person standing in the room who had come into the office was saying, maybe quality is not right for you. That's a little bit silly, actually. You've got to base your decision on reality. Workers are not perfect. People do make mistakes. And if you expect them to make zero mistakes, that is not a constructive incentive to talk to them about. If you want to talk to them about how can we improve what you're doing, what your documentation is, what your system is like, what the systems are that you have to deal with in order to get things done and to reduce your mistakes, then that's a constructive conversation to have. A big part of quality is to evangelize quality and make sure that people understand the things that we've been talking about, because it's not just something that a founder or a CEO needs to know and can implement. That these principles have to be propagated. Things like documentation and making sure that feedback loops are constructive. That is a thing that has to be adopted by your entire organization. And in fact, if you hire one quality person for your organization, they are probably going to, ideally they should, spend a lot of their time talking to other people in your organization about quality issues and quality processes to make it clear how to take the best advantage of the feedback you get and improve your processes ideally. Evangelize the quality to team leaders and follow through on that. If you talk a big game about quality, but then turn around when there's a quality problem and say, well, let's just get through it this time, and it probably won't happen again. You are not following through on that. The example that you're setting in guiding that process has an effect on everybody in your organization. And you need to be ready to mentor people, not just on personnel issues or issues of your industry, learning terminology or technology, but mentor them on quality issues and processes as well. I know after a 1 hour presentation, you're not going to be an expert, but you are definitely going to learn some things here that will be worth mentoring and passing on to your organization. You need to empower the self-evaluation of an individual and teams. If you can give them guidelines, targets, numbers that you say, you need to try and keep this number as low as possible. These need to be, your goals need to be following these metrics or paying attention to these metrics. Then you allow the individual and the team to monitor themselves, and they will come to you and say, look, we think we're making an improvement here, or we're having problems here. And you can have a higher level of conversation with them at that point. Quality leadership also is about continuously improving processes. And this is very closely related to what we talked about on the previous slide of if a process is not working, fix it. You need to also finally let workers redeem themselves. A bad conversation would be, you got to do better. You can't make so many mistakes. This falls under the heading of an exhortation, and it can lead to a bad incentive for the worker. A better conversation is, how can we do better? What can we put in place to reduce the level of errors that are involved in this job? And the best situation of all is when you follow through and keep up with that process, keep up with that team or employee, and see that they are growing in their knowledge and understanding of quality. We're going to also spend a little bit talking about setting goals. The funny thing is, I mean, this image is very cute. It is a corgi jumping over, like a paper towel roll. The goal is very clearly very low. That you got to start somewhere, and this corgi is not jumping over a crazy obstacle. But this is funny, but it is also absolutely true. You do have to start somewhere, and you will need to set some goals. And it's easier than you think to set some bad goals. An example that's very often used in talking about quality is there was a bus, I forget what city it was, but they devised the bus schedule by having a supervisor drive from one stop to the next stop to the next stop, and measure the time that it took. And then based on that, they made the schedule, and they also had an exhortation that if the driver misses the schedule, they will be disciplined. Probably some of you are already noticing that there's an important missing piece of information or feedback in this loop, and that is the passengers. The passengers are going to have to get on, they're going to have to get off. They may have questions, they may need change. There are lots of things that can go on with regards to the passengers. And in this particular case, which is a real case in history, what happened was the bus drivers, knowing that they were going to be disciplined if they missed the schedule, they didn't bother picking up any passengers until their managers fixed the problem. This is a big failure of the system, but it is the system that the managers managed to accidentally set up. Things that would have been better metrics, numbers to talk about for a bus driver is the average departure delay, the delay after you're scheduled to leave on the schedule should be as low as possible. If the driver is able to provide feedback on why they weren't able to meet these goals, that's really valuable information. Let's consider this question. The number of passengers should be as high as possible. Is that a reasonable goal for a bus driver? And I would say no. The bus driver is not recruiting passengers. They're not out there trying to get passengers on board. The bus driver can focus on driving and making schedules, answering questions, taking money, all of those things. But the number of passengers might be a good departmental goal or a goal for the whole transit group, but not so much for a driver. So let's consider some other example questions. Let's say let's talk about a QA tester who finds the most bugs, and they get recognition in the weekly meeting based on the number of bugs they find. Some of you may have experienced this kind of incentive in the past, and what very often happens is that the QA person will file a very large number of low quality bugs in order to make that number as high as possible, which is a perverse incentive that you have accidentally set. How about the number of customer found bugs in your product should be as low as possible? That sounds okay, actually. That sounds like a reasonable goal to have. A test automation engineer who fixes the most broken tests. If you worked with test automation, one thing that happens over time as the product changes, as the application changes, is tests get broken because they no longer can talk to the application in the same way. And so maybe a test automation engineer who fixes the most broken test gets a trophy. I have done an assessment, and I'll talk a little bit more about assessments in a second, for a prospective client who managed to set up this exact system. They had a bunch of test automation engineers, and they were incentivizing the engineers to fix the most tests in every release cycle. This is bad, actually. You're really incentivizing the test automation engineers to not make robust fixes to their software. You are not incentivizing them to correctly refactor and move into libraries and make code that is more maintainable or more robust. And this is not the incentive that you want to set. In the final example I mentioned earlier, if you were to incentivize branch bankers to get a bonus for every new account that they open, that sounds okay on the surface, but in practice, what happens is the bankers will start opening accounts for people who didn't really want accounts to be opened in order to get that sweet, sweet cash. And it got one of our large banks into trouble just a few years ago. Okay, we're moving on to the tools that you can use to work on quality in your organization. I'm afraid I'm going to have to say a few things about process documentation and documentation as a practice, as I mentioned earlier. But the news is not all bad. When you're writing documentation, which is very valuable, every piece of knowledge that you have in your organization has value. So probably almost all of it should be documented. The good news is if you're documenting a process, you should always start small. You can always start small. You don't need to sit down and spend a day writing a process. If you write a process that is just do the same thing we did last time, and then at the end, keep an ear out for feedback from the partner, from the customer, and have a meeting, schedule a meeting to talk about the feedback. That's 3 steps, and that is a really good process right there. You can, let's talk about the first step in process improvement is having a process, and that needs to be written down. You probably already have a whole bunch of processes, but depending on how they're documented or not at all, they may kind of turn out different every time. The second step in process improvement is writing it down. The first draft of a new process is 80% of the work. Just figuring out what is this document, who needs to know about it, where should I store it? Is this part of my business plan? Is this go in a 3-ring binder in the production line? Where does this document go? If you can copy other people's processes that you think are already good, success, you win. You should totally copy other people's processes. These are people who, hopefully have similar problems and businesses to you, and you should feel free. If they have shared what works for them, if you want to base your processes on that, that's great. Checklists are a very, very simple way that you're already familiar with to have everyday quality in your organization. If your customer service person has a checklist of, here's how I greet the person on the phone. Here are the questions that I make sure I know before they start telling me their problem that they're having. Here are the ways that I start to address the problem. And at the end, I ask them if they want to fill out a survey, and I thank them for buying our product. That is a checklist. It is not that long. It is very, very effective. Everybody from pilots to surgeons use checklists, and it's an extremely powerful tool. Entrepreneurship in general is full of surprises. You don't know what's going to happen. Someone may make an offer for your company. You may want to take out a loan. All of the documentation that you have can help you. If someone is interested in acquiring your new business, they're going to want to do due diligence, and they're going to want to look at your documentation. If you are talking to a banker about a loan, you are going to talk about your business plan. You are going to talk about your sales. You are going to talk about the processes that you've put in place for your business to keep it running in order to convince them that you know what you're doing and you're worth a loan. And you don't know what other kinds of opportunities might come along that you're going to want that documentation for. Once you have a process, a good way to improve it is to look for things that should be look for things to do better each time that you run through the process. Which brings us to feedback loops, another huge important tool for quality. We talked a little bit about Deming earlier, the guy who went over after World War II to Japan. His mentor at Western Electric in the period leading up to World War II was a guy called Schuhart. And he is credited with inventing this plan, which you may have run across if you've had some kind of management training in your past. And it's a very, very powerful template that you can apply to any process that you have in order to continuously improve it. The P is to plan. You plan your change or experiment, or kind of your work even. If you're running a factory, maybe you're just planning on the next build. Here are the parts we need to order. Here are the staff that we're going to need that we need to arrange for. We are writing the plan for this next thing that we're going to do. If you're writing software for this, we'll talk about that a little bit more in a second before I go into that. So do is when you do we call it the experiment or the test, but it is the work that you have already been doing. It is, if you're a software consultant like me, then it is the work of making the software happen, making that software work and release to the users that have the new features that they want, that have the fixed bugs that they want. The check phase is something that was added a little bit later to the PDCA cycle to explicitly say, okay, after we have done the work, we need to stop. We need to make sure that we are getting feedback on the work that we did. We need to talk to the workers. We need to talk to the people that received the products and make sure that we have feedback and organize that feedback so that it makes the best sense. And then the act phase, which is where you review all those results and you update the process for the next run through. All right. So in your business, depending on what kind of business you have, your PDCA might look somewhat different. In software world, which is where I live, This is part of Agile. This was adopted into Agile and to Scrum so that the plan is sprint planning. The do is the implement the software stage. The check is the sprint review. And the act is the retrospect, where we're figuring out, okay, here are the things that we need to do before the next plan, so that we can make the process better. If you're in manufacturing or in services, then your plan is going to be planning a production run. As I said, ordering the parts, making sure you have the people lined up. If you're in services, you may have a quarterly improvement plan, or based on some other cycle of your business that you have a plan. Do is you in manufacturing, you run the line, you build products. In servicing, you do service calls. You go and you do the thing. You take calls from customers and do the work. Then check is where you gather and analyze that feedback to understand the problems. And the act is updating the processes, training for workers, and documentation for the next cycle. Are there other kinds of feedback loops other than sort of your main work that are constructive? Yes, any process can have a feedback loop like this, the PDCA cycle, the Shewhart cycle applied to it. And an interesting thing to think about is that last step where you're doing stuff to improve things next time. You may spin off a process. For instance, in the 80s, Ford's main process, obviously, was building cars. They spun off a completely different process called the 8D process that we're going to mention in a minute. That is a process for dealing with especially thorny and intractable problems that they came up with for their industry and for their environment. And then as people run that process, they may also want to apply the PDCA cycle to it to continuously improve it. Anytime that feedback to you or to partner companies is painful or uncomfortable, a formal process can be really good. Big businesses, manufacturers especially, often have a process called a CAR, corrective action request, that we'll talk about in a little bit. And this is just a formal way to say, we want to keep working with you, but something went bad on this most recent shipment that we got from you, and we want to work with you to make sure that that gets fixed moving forward. So yeah, we talked about dealing with external partners with that corrective action. Between departments, if you have a very large company, that same kind of communication can also happen. And one of the benefits of having these kinds of processes is that all of the stakeholders, ideally, can see their issues being addressed or at least listened to and considered. Let's talk about testing, which you may have been thinking, given this, the title of this presentation, you may have thought that's what this presentation was about, testing. Testing is a special and very useful kind of feedback loop. For most of the feedback loops we've been talking about, they're very slow, requiring time for customers to get their hands on your product and start using it, and then report problems back to you. But a testing team, or if you're in a manufacturing or service contract, you might you might have a test lab or a test person, can radically speed up specific feedback loops. And things that you'll want for a tester are area knowledge for your particular product area, that they need to write new tests, conscientiousness to avoid bias and do the work, even though it's sometimes tedious to do testing. It is important to avoid preconceptions about what the results are going to be. And understanding of the PDCA cycle so that they can continuously improve the work that they do as your market and as your needs for your organization change. This is a popular meme going around, and the two fists or the two arms are usually the sort of diverse groups that are agreeing on something. But in this case, I'm trying to point out that both documenting processes and going through the PDCA cycle to continuously improve processes are two things that combine into improving your product quality. So what kind of new process might come out if we're going through maybe our main product process for our software sprint or our production run? Maybe a checklist of information that the accounting department needs for a specific situation. That would be a new process that might come out of that. Maybe a process for dealing with supplier problems, the corrective action request, which has details in it like a detailed description of the problem that you had with the materials you got from the supplier, the desired outcome, what you want to have happen, moving forward, please, adjust these parts so that they fit our specifications exactly. Maybe you're dealing with a partner software company. Your API needs to respond in this amount of time. You need to improve your security so that people feeding trash into the API can't provoke crashes or security problems. If the supplier needs additional information, then there is something in that corrective action request process for them to request that and have meetings with you. And there might be serious issues that come up where a supplier or partner needs to discuss the business or contract issues, the amount of that they're getting paid, and a corrective action request may well involve have directions on, okay, how does this escalation process work to keep everybody happy with how that goes. This is the 8D process that I mentioned earlier, which came about at Ford in 1987 and has been widely adopted by manufacturing companies. This particular version comes out of National Semiconductor. And it is pretty heavyweight. You would not want to use this process in a small business, pretty much. But it is for some place as big as Ford, it makes really good sense that you want to have members of every team on board, that you want a very clear description of the problem, that you want to have mitigations for the problem so the customer pain stops as quickly as possible. You spend some time in a test lab verifying the root causes. You spend some more time maybe on a test production line verifying the corrective actions. You implement the corrective actions. You start propagating the changes you made to anybody who may be able to use them. Maybe you found that a particular kind of rubber isn't suitable in some cases. It's more than just your particular area of the company that needs to know that. If you propagate that information about your findings, that can improve everything in your company, not just your corner of it. And congratulating your team. This is something that when I was working at Logitech, I kind of dismissed. I felt bad about this congratulating your team section because it felt like, do we really need to do this? But if you've gotten members of other teams who are taking time away from their normal duties and their managers have agreed to let you borrow them, congratulating the team and pointing out that this kind of process can help improve the products of your company is actually really important. Chris, you may be thinking, that process looks super complicated for something that spun off from one of my weekly sprint reviews. Yes, that is a super complicated process. You should not have a process that complicated. It always should start simple. If the process is important to you, you can apply the PDCA cycle to that process, and it will improve over time. Another thing you might be asking, I thought quality was about test plans and finding bugs. That's why I signed up for this seminar. But instead, we're talking about loops and documentation. Am I in the right presentation? Yes, you're in the right presentation. If you undertake the practice of documentation, you will have test plans. You have to have test plans so that you can run the same tests. And if you undertake the practice of continuous improvement, those test plans will find bugs. Because if they don't find bugs, then they're bad test plans and they have to be improved. Let's talk about some more tools. Pareto charts. You've heard of the Pareto principle. 80-20 rule, like 20% of the problems take up 80% of the time, or 20% of a plant contains 80% of the fruit. This kind of thing, it's given as a rule of thumb in business, is not so useful. But you can turn it into a chart. This is a real live Pareto chart that comes out of an Australian state's analysis of medication errors in their medical system. You can see across the bottom the different bins that they decided on when they were analyzing their data. And you can see the frequency of how often these things happen is the height of the bar graph. The red things are the vital few and the trivial many. These just kind of call out to you that you can easily identify, once you have sorted your problems into these kinds of categories, it becomes very clear to you where you ought to be spending most of your time. In order to do this, looking at the left-hand column, you're going to have to get some fresh raw data. You don't want data that's been previously processed by somebody. You're going to want to go directly to people who are taking calls or people who are looking at the output of your assembly line and get some of that data. You can work with a random sample of that data. If you have 10,000 calls a week to your call center, you don't have to work with all 10,000. If you take 1,000 of those or 100 of those even, you can start to do this kind of work. You will need to start reading through them. I just sit down and begin reading. After you read 10 or 15, you'll start to see that there are bins, there are categories that you can start putting these into. And that's what these lines across the bottom are. The dose miss, the wrong time, or wrong drug, overdose. And this kind of tool is so fantastic for prioritizing your work, the place that you and your organization spends your time to make sure that you are addressing problems that happen very often or that affect the most users. This kind of chart is extremely valuable. Now that we've looked at a few tools, I'm going to point out a few things. Process improvement doesn't mean that you have to fix every problem every cycle. If you fix just some problems every cycle and they stay fixed, you can fix just a few each cycle and still make big overall improvements. In order to make sure a problem stays fixed, you're going to want to identify the root cause. Let's talk about some root cause. This is, unless you've already studied quality, you're not going to get this, but it just tickled me when I was working on the presentation. Ishikawa and the 5 Whys, which I imagined as a kind of a doo-wop group. So Ishikawa was one of, we talked about earlier, the work that went on after World War II in Japan. Ishikawa was one of the people in Japan who really took the studies of quality and ran with them. And one of the things that he came up with is the fishbone diagram, which is a way to organize a comprehensive list of all the causal factors. This was done by a professional consulting firm based on a real problem. A few years ago, the Los Angeles Long Beach port congestion. This was not done officially for the Long Beach port, but it was done just to kind of show off this company's capabilities. But I find it a really good example. And this is the first stage of doing some root cause analysis. In this particular case, they labeled their fish bones as political, financial, manpower, physical, other assets, machinery. You may have bones on your fish of different sizes. You may have things that only have one or two factors in them, or you may have some that have 20 factors in them, and that's okay. The goal is just to have a comprehensive list. And you can see, under political, there was no unified oversight. There was a blame game going on where people weren't paying attention to the real problems that were being faced by port users, port ships coming in, and people who are trying to ship stuff out of the port. Union negotiations were going on at the same time. You can see the detail level that we go into in each category. So what can you do once you find a full list of things? You can start applying another tool, which is the 5 whys to it. And this is a real example from my time at Logitech when I worked on a product called the Squeeze Box that had a little loudspeaker in it. And customers started calling up and saying there was white powder on the speaker grill. Why was there white powder on the speaker grill? Well, we sent a sample off to a lab. It turns out it was a fungal growth. Why was there a fungal growth on the speaker grill? Parts were left on the loading dock in the rain at the factory. Okay, we're going on to another why. Why were there parts left on the loading dock? Well, the warehouse, the storage areas at our factory were full. Okay, wait, why were the storage areas all full? Because there were unexpected production line schedule changes, and we were not consuming the stuff that was in the warehouse. We had to bring in more stuff for to support the changes. Okay, why were there unexpected changes, and why did that cause a problem? The easy answer is, well, if there's schedule line changes, it's a business decision. It's kind of out of our hands. There's nothing that we as a group working on the Squeeze Box product could have done about it. But didn't we say something earlier about involving the whole team? A better answer to that would be that factory personnel were unprepared to deal with incoming shipments on the builds that got delayed due to the schedule changes. There was an existing checklist for them to go through when this kind of thing happened, but there wasn't anything about how to deal with the incoming shipments. So we were able to work with the factory team and get that kind of information added to the checklist. All right. So I hope this has been a constructive thing for you. You've learned a few things about quality, especially about the practice of documentation and about process improvement using the PDCA, or Shewhart cycle, as it's called. Oh, I forgot to say, I was going to talk about assessments. This is a thing that Improving does that your company might be interested in. In addition to having people working on software projects for you, we can also look at your existing processes and your existing product and write up a detailed list of work that we would like to do, that we recommend doing. And we have people here who are experts in various fields, including quality, who will contribute to that document, and you get that back. And that is something that we do it separately from our consulting practice, or from the practice of having people writing software for you. And this is a thing that I get involved with fairly often in terms of recommending changes to a process to improve quality. And I really recommend, if that's something that sounds like it might be a good first step for you, to have some experts analyze your system, your processes, and give recommendations without going in for a contract of people working for you. That is definitely an assessment that you can get done. All right, that's it. Thanks for coming. We can take some Q&A if you have any questions.
Thank you all for attending today's Improving talk. And Chris, thank you for sharing this. So you've decided you need more quality.
Thank you.
The recording of this session will be available the next business day. To view the recording, locate the session from Improving's virtual events page, where you can also register for future Improving virtual events. Hope you all have a wonderful week.